Today, I talked to my good friend Billy Oppenheimer, who's Ryan Holiday's book research assistant. Over the last 4 years, Billy helped Ryan write 3 best-selling books: Stillness is the Key, Discipline is Destiny, and Courage is Calling. And in today's episode, we're going to dive deep into the exact strategy that he used to land his dream job with Ryan, how Billy and Ryan collaborate on a book. Billy also reveals every single step of the book writing process, from coming up with the idea for a book to sending the book out to publishers. And finally, Billy shares what he learned working with Robert Greene on his book, The Daily Laws. All right, let's dive in. Billy.
Hey.
Welcome to the show, man.
Good to be here.
As always, I like to dive straight in. So can you start off by sharing the story of how you got the job with Ryan Holiday as his research assistant?
Yeah, so it sort of begins when I just graduated from college. I did this sort of traveling thing. It was bouncing around and was in Australia, then Colorado to New Zealand, and was just jumping around. And in that time, I started a blog just to keep friends and family like up with what I was doing. And
It was like a travel blog?
Sort of, but I hadn't yet discovered Ryan's work, but I was gravitating towards a similar style of using stories that like I wasn't really appearing in, but then tying it to something I was learning along the way. And I think it was because of that style that someone that had read the blog recommended Ryan's work to me. And the first book that was recommended was called Perennial Seller. I picked up a copy of that book and I read it on a flight. I remember just getting to the end of it, and at the back it's like also by author, and it lists all his other work. And I ordered everything else that he had written up to that point and just went down the rabbit hole of his work, read his blog, started reading Daily Stoic and the daily email and everything. Through that I learned about his trajectory of working with Robert Greene and some other writers, and it was in learning about that I was like, okay, well maybe I'll reach out to Ryan and try to like apprentice under him the way that he did with Robert. So I sent him an email in like 2018, I think, early 2018, and just like, thanks for your work kind of thing. And if there's ever a chance to work for you, like all of your books are sending me down a rabbit hole of reading, and to have that be focused by what you're working on would be awesome.
Can you pull up, I know you have that email pulled up. Can we take a look at it and how it's structured? And and maybe you can comment on what you think you did right or didn't do right. And
I was going to say that it's not the email I would send today. If I were doing it over, I would have done it differently, but I think the timing was right. Daily Stoic was just starting to get bigger. Ryan's own books were just starting to sort of take off. So I think my timing was right, but if I sent this email today, I don't think it would have got my foot in the door. So I would have done it differently. But
first off, thank you for the work you do. Your books, Daily Stoic, RyanHoliday.net, have been a huge influence.
Yeah.
And then second, it's pretty good. I mean, second, I wouldn't call myself a writer, but I love books. So basically in the second paragraph, what do? You're telling him...
I just sort of trying to establish some context of who I am, why I'm then getting to the, like, I would like to help you with research. So it's like trying to establish a little bit of my background of like my interest in books. I studied English in college. I think somewhere in there I included a quote from a philosophy professor in college. On the first day of class, he said, "The value in this material is not in the novelty, it's in the utility." I say in this email, like, I always liked that quote, but I wasn't exactly like sure what I liked about it. And then it was in reading Ryan's work that like that quote came back and was like, oh, that's what he meant. Like, these aren't like new ideas, but they're like practical and you can actually use them. And that sort of like clicked for me in reading Ryan's stuff. So I sort of mentioned that quote in the email and then talk about like his output.
So it's basically like flattering. The second one is kind of like a little bit about yourself and like showing that you kind of think about this stuff a lot, and also showcasing a little bit about you and like how you think about this stuff. Third, it seems like it's like another flattering kind of. And then the last one is that like, hey, by the way,
makes me a little uncomfortable when I now read it.
No, I think it shows personality, right? And I think like, that probably resonates. Like, this kid's genuine and like.
Yeah, but I used the word flummoxed twice, and that's just not a word I use.
It was maybe to show off like some
I don't know what I was thinking with that, but
that's funny. How would you do it today?
So today, what I would have done is would have delivered something on the front end. I now know the process of Daily Stoic, for instance, of how he writes those emails. He writes them in batches and he tries to build a backlog. So I should have done some of that work to like see how is he actually able to produce as much as he is. And I'm sure still like it would be nice to have a larger buffer than he already has. So what I would have done was like written 20 or so Daily Stoic like emails and just sent them to him and be like, hey, I was just trying to get some reps in as a writer. I love your style, so I wanted to try to mimic it. And I thought maybe there's something here that you could use. Like, by all means, if there's anything you like I don't need any credit, or just they're yours.
Yeah.
And if you have any feedback,
free work.
Yeah, exactly. So just like doing some free work, and in that you're also showing like ability, or even if, like, do I have a taste for pulling quotes and anecdotes? Like, you're able to show that up front.
It's like a two-sided test, right? Like on one end you're seeing like, oh, do I actually like this work? And on the other it's like, can you actually do this work, right? And like to the quality of like the expectations.
Right. Yeah. I have been getting those that are like, hey, I'd like to do what you did with Ryan. Let me know how I can help. That is like putting an obligation on my plate. If I take you up on that, I have to figure out like, how can this person if I don't know, how can they help me? Versus like show it on the front end how you actually can add value to this person, whether it's like saving them time, saving them money, like whatever it is. But can you show that up front before you just say like, hey, busy person, when you have a second, think about what I can do to help you,
Yeah. Why do you think Ryan said yes to your email? What do you think about it? And
well, so I can show you. He said, that's a great line from your professor. Honored to hear my books have been useful. I may have a research project to do with Daily Stoic. I will forward you to someone on my team. So again, I think it was like right place, right time. I don't know if he went and looked, if he like looked me up and saw that I was already writing online. I was like already doing the thing. But I've heard him since talk about how like he likes to see, if someone reaches out to him, he likes to see like, are they already doing the thing? It's like, you don't have to be published in the New York Times, but like, did you start a blog and are you doing the thing just because you like to do it? Like, are you not waiting around for permission? And it's almost more impressive if you're writing into the void, and it just shows that like, you just like to do the thing. And that's sort of what I was doing with the blog. Looking back, it didn't feel like that at the time, but like, I just liked doing it. No one was really reading it, but I think he might have liked that aspect. Honestly, I'm not exactly sure what he was thinking when he saw this email and why he replied.
Nice. Okay, so he connected you with someone on his team. What happened then?
So he connected me with this guy named Brent, who's still one of his business partners. And Brent at the time like handled all things Daily Stoic related. And the email list, I think at that point was like 50,000 people, and it was pre like Daily Stoic having a YouTube channel or a podcast. Like to get the word out about the newsletter was through the blog at the time. So there's a lot of like SEO articles and profiles of the Stoics and book reviews of the main Stoic texts. So they were starting to increase that output on dailystoic.com just as a way to bring people in to ultimately try to get them on the newsletter. So I was doing some of those articles. One of the first projects was like to read discourses by Epictetus and write up like a book review, like the core lessons from Epictetus, the best quotes, like that kind of thing. That went well. I did that. And then here's another project. And then another early one I remember was Ryan had a long call with Robert Greene. It's like a 2.5 hour conversation. And he sent me he sent me the audio. I was like, hey, can you just transcribe this? So I just transcribed it. It was just like random projects like that as they would pop up. It was not on like any consistent basis. It was just random. I would check my email and like Ryan or Brent was like, hey, any interest in working on this? I would just be like, yep, I'm on it.
And these were like small, like unpaid projects, right?
Yeah, well, they were like paying me like, I don't even remember what it was, but that was like one of Ryan's things. It was like, he didn't want anyone like working for free for him. So he was paying me like per project, but it was just like, that was sort of irrelevant for me. I was like really in it for just wanting to be a part of what he was doing and like wanting to learn from him.
And what was the transition from those small projects to full-time position?
Yeah, so 3 or 4 months into like the random project thing. And at the time I was living in Colorado. In that email, I actually mentioned like that I follow him on Strava, which is like a social exercise app or whatever. And every time I'd pull it up, like Ryan had just posted a run. And at one point I pulled it up as I was like about to go for a run one day, and he had just posted a run from Vail, Colorado, which was like 5 minutes from where I was living at the time. I could see it from where I stood when I was, getting ready to go for a run. So I emailed him, was like, hey, how long are you out here for? I live just down the street. It'd be awesome to meet you in person finally. And he got back to me. He was like, I'm here for, I'm speaking at some conference tomorrow. Like if you come to it, we could find some time before or after to hang out for a little bit. So I went to the conference that next day, and he spoke, and like after we just chatted for 10 or 15 minutes before his car got there and he was going to the airport. And he was like, I was talking to my business partner this morning about wanting to bring on someone full time. Like, do you have any interest? And I was like, yep, sign me up.
Wow.
And
I didn't realize that, because so you were a ski instructor at the time, right?
Yes.
While you're doing these like gigs for him.
Yeah, exactly. So I would go ski instruct, and I'd come home and just like work on stuff as it came up.
That's awesome. A lot of times the way you get into these like backstage careers is it's kind of like a side hustle, right? It's a side gig on the side that you're either in school. For me, I was in school, or you have a job, or it's like you're a ski instructor and you're doing this like in your nights and weekends type thing.
Yep.
And it's like just a little bit of work, but that kind of like transit, that's like enough stuff, like enough work that you're doing for them that you can show value, and that like when they're ready to hire a full-time position, like a full-time person, like you're top of mind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like you want to just like be in their vicinity. Not like, you don't want to just like blast them with emails every day, but you just like pop up occasionally. And I still do this with writers that I really like not necessarily because I want it to lead to something, but just like I'll send them, if I read something, it's like, oh, this is like exactly what so-and-so writes about, I'm going to send it to them. And just like things like that, where you just like stay in their orbit sort of. And then when something comes up and they're thinking about like, oh, I could use some help on some research. So it's like, well, that kid like sends me cool articles from time to time. Like he's got a pretty good taste for like what I like and what I write about. Like maybe he would be interested. Like I feel like that's how it kind of happens.
I love that. Who do you do that with right now?
I send like Morgan Housel stuff, Hal Newport. I've sent stuff to like Seth Godin and gotten a reply from him, which is what has been cool. And
do you send us like over email or like via Twitter? Or?
Yeah, email. I'll just email it to him.
Email.
And like with like Seth Godin, like I'll sometimes just reply to his daily email. Like if I read it and it reminds me of like something, I'll just be like, here's another quote related to this idea. Just like stuff like that.
Does he check it himself? Like,
he seems to. I've gotten replies from it, and they're always short. Like a lot of these, even like Ryan, like you saw that reply, he was like, "That's a great quote. I'll be in touch." Like they're very. And Seth goes the same way. He's like, "That's perfect," or like, "That's a great line," or something like that.
Yeah, it's funny. You'd be surprised. Like the people, like newsletters. I feel like a lot of the OG writers that don't have like social media, they have like their newsletter. The newsletter is their baby, right? And so like when people actually reply, they it's like comments on social media, right? Like they might see it and reply. That's interesting.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, so you get the full-time position. Did you move to in person? Was it still remote? And like, did your assignments change?
It was still remote. It was just, and it was similar work. It was just on a more consistent basis. And I was more working directly with Brent, taking some stuff off his plate. So like I took over the Daily Stoic content calendar, scheduling stuff into ConvertKit, like the email service provider would use. So I was like handling all the emails that went out. I was scheduling them. I was deciding like I would propose a calendar. So like we try to stay like a month ahead on the newsletter, organizing the content that's ready to go. When is stuff running? How is it getting scheduled? Like I took over all of that kind of stuff.
So your main responsibility was managing the Daily Stoic newsletter.
Yeah, essentially.
Is that fair to say?
Yep. And then around that time, we started the podcast, which initially was just Ryan recording the emails. Whatever ran in the newsletter was mirrored on the podcast. And we contracted someone to do the editing, but I was still like uploading those into, we used like Buzzsprout at the time or something. But so yeah, it was just like all things Daily Stoic pretty much, because it was really starting to take off, that newsletter.
Nice. And then I know today you help Ryan like research, do like book research, right? Like research for his books. How did you transition to that?
So the process for how he writes emails is not totally different from how he writes like a chapter in a book. And one of the things he does pretty frequently is like he'll know the story he's wanting to use in his writing, and he knows like the broad brushstrokes of it, but he doesn't always remember the finer details. So he'll be writing like a Daily Stoic email or a chapter for a book, and instead of like breaking his momentum and like popping open another tab and searching something, he'll just write insert in all caps, or he'll write if it's a year, he's like 19XX. Like he can't remember exactly what it is. So then he'll tag me like in that email and like, hey, can you fill in the gaps here? And then I'll just find those details. So I was doing that with the Daily Stoic email, and then it became I would do that on the book chapters. Ryan, he'd be writing about like Queen Elizabeth or something. He's wanting to triangulate a story about the Queen. So he's trying to read everything anywhere that the story has been written about. He wants to read it. So he's read it in these 3 places, and he's like, hey, can you go find it in this biography? And he just wants to find all the details surrounding that story to see if like, did this biographer leave something out that like I might want to use? So then I'll just go off and try to find it, send him like that stuff in a document, and then he decides like if he's going to use it or not. And then I might not see it until like the draft of that chapter is ready, but it's stuff like that. And then as I'm going about and just like reading stuff, I know what he's working on. So if I see something related to like, so right now he's working on the 3rd book in this Stoic Virtue series on justice. So as I'm going about and like reading stuff, if I see something that's interesting that might fit with what he's writing about, I'll send it to him. And then it's like, he decides if he wants to use it or not.
So does he give you reading assignments where it's like, he's working on something and there's like, oh, there's a couple books related to this. Billy, can you read these and like select anything that might be relevant for the book?
Yeah. It's more so he gets interested in the person. And so like the Justice book again, like Harry Truman is going to be a core character in that book. So we're just trying to read like everything about Truman. And so Ryan will be like, I've read these books. I don't really want to read this one. Can you read it? And like, if there's anything good, send it to me. We're looking for very specific things in Truman's life. So I'm not like reading it front to back. I'm like going digging for like the stuff related. So I'm like referencing the index and like, oh, here's where he talks about this person. And like, I've seen Ryan talk about that person. So let me flip to that page and see like if there's anything around here. I'm just like sort of doing that kind of stuff. I'm going digging for like
interesting
what he might be able to use.
Do you have like can you show us like how you collaborate with Ryan on those things? Like like a doc? It doesn't have to be, I'm sure you can share like the next book. But maybe something from the previous book.
Yeah, I can show you. So like this was for the Discipline book, which came out a few weeks ago. And like you can see when he first started this folder, he was kicking around titles, and it was only the discipline is free / self-discipline is salvation or something like that. So he writes like the first quarter of the book in Google Docs. And then once he feels like he's got a good chunk of it written, I'll put everything into a Word document. So he's starting to write them here. And as he writes a chapter, he'll tag me in it to do what I was saying earlier about like those inserts and the dates and all those finer details.
So each of these documents here is a chapter?
Yeah, each doc here is a chapter. He's labeling them.
I see like part 1, get up early.
Yep.
Part 2, put up boundaries. There's several part 2s and part 3s. Are those like revisions of each chapter?
No, so it's like Discipline is Destiny is broken into 3 parts. The chapter and where in the book it's going to go. And then he gets like, or a quarter of the way, and then he wants to see it all in one place. So we'll move it to a Word document. Then I'll print it out and read it, what he's got, just to get a feel for it. And then he continues writing chapters in Google Docs and keeps adding to this folder. Then he gets half of the way done, and we add that to a Word document. And then it's just like that process repeats until the whole thing's written, and they print it out in a Word document and just sort of iterate from there.
Wow, that's super interesting. Does he have, so here I see he has chapters, he has a blurb, description cover.
Yep.
Does he have like an outline of the book when he starts off in here as well? Or?
No, not in here. That's a good question. I actually don't know how he does that. I think he's like, his main thing is he wants to crack the structure of the book before he starts writing it. And all of the research happens like on note cards, like his note card system. So he's starting to organize all the material on note cards, like at the painted porch where his office is. Like if you go over there right now, you'll just see like note cards sprawled out on his desk, organized by like the theme of the Justice book. So he's sort of plotting it out in physical form, and then he cracks what the structure is going to be, and then he moves to Google Docs.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
And so then how do you collaborate on this? Can you show us like where he says like insert this and where you fill in the gaps? And you guys communicate mostly via email, right?
Yeah, and I also go over to the painted porch twice a week. So like I'll go over there today, and like he might want to talk specifically about certain chapters he's written, and he'll tell me like, hey, I need you to track down this or that. So now that, but prior to me being here in Austin and like going into the Peanut Porch, it was all email. In the Google Doc itself, he would just tag me and like say, this is what I need. So part 2 of Discipline opens up, like Queen Elizabeth is this sort of example to open up part 2. But yeah, at this point, like everything would have been filled in.
Okay. Yeah, but I get the idea. It would basically be a bracket where it's like, fill this in, or you'll like comment on it.
Yeah, no, or it'll literally say insert in all caps in the text, and he'll tag me at the like top of the chapter, and I'll just go and look at like what needs to be filled in.
Got it. What about when you're going through like a book that like the Queen Elizabeth or the Truman book that he doesn't want to read, that you're going through? Do you what does that output look like when you're sending that to him?
Oh, I can actually show you. So this is actually about JFK, who's like, there's a chapter in Discipline. So he's writing about Kennedy in the Discipline book. And like, this is the doc I put together of all the research I was finding on what he was wanting to write about. When I put this timeline together, JFK, that injections were doing him more harm than good, dismissed as saying, I don't care if it's horse piss, it works. So Ryan says more quotes like this. But yeah, I'm just like assembling everything I could find.
And so this was like from a Google search or from like reading books, multiple biographies?
Yeah, so it started with a story and a biography of JFK started taking like these painkillers. And Ryan wanted to like triangulate that like anywhere we could find, like when it started, what doctors he saw, like all these kind of details. So I'm just going into various books that he hadn't yet read. There was like an Atlantic article written about it. And then as you're like getting more familiar with the details surrounding the story, like your search can get more specific. So then I might go into like the Google Books tab and just like quote search that horse piss quote, for instance. In what other books is that quote referenced? And then I know like in that point of that book, they're talking about this story. So then I can just go straight to that point in that book. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Dude, this is so interesting, man. And so this is the output, and you had the timeline.
Yeah, so then Ryan sees all of this and then takes it and distills it into like a 1.5-page chapter in a Google Doc, you know?
That's cool. How long did it take you to put together a document like this?
This probably took me like 3 or 4 hours. It's one of those things where you just like forget how much time has gone by, because I get interested in like the story, and there's more here than he needed, you know? But like, I just got interested in the story, and it was just like, I just kept tracing, like you find like threads that you just like, oh, let me go check this one out. Let me go check this one out.
It's kind of investigative journalism in a way, right?
Yeah.
Except you're studying figures of history.
Right. Like instead of like interviewing the person, you're just finding like everything that's been written about them.
That's really interesting. Cool. Yeah. And this was in Discipline.
Yeah. So then
I did the Discipline book.
This actually might be The Battle Against Pain. So this was the chapter that he wrote from all of that research.
Ah, that's cool.
So yeah, then so like this document is 8 pages, and then he writes a chapter on it.
Cool. Any other areas that you help him with? So you mentioned basically filling in the gaps when he's like looking for specific dates, and then just doing special research projects, right? Where you're like going deep on like one story, or reading a book that like Ryan doesn't particularly want to read, but like might have some gold still, sifting for that. Any other thing that you do around like the book researching?
As I'm just like reading stuff, I send it to him. People will ask me like if I make note cards for Ryan, because like that's a huge part of his process. And I say like my job is to like find stuff that he might want to put on a note card. I don't make the note cards for him, but I try to bring him material that he might then want to transfer onto a note card. So I'm just constantly sending him stuff.
Nice. And you've worked with Robert Greene as well since starting with Ryan, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that and what project you worked with him on, and if his process was different at all as Ryan's process?
Yeah, so we helped him with the daily laws, and that process is way different than Robert's typical book writing process and like the research that go into the laws of human nature, for instance. This one was essentially a greatest hits album. Like the daily laws is like the best stuff of Robert compiled and like separated by theme into one book.
And that's inspired by the Daily Stoic from Ryan, right? That's kind of was the impetus behind creating that for Robert.
So with that, like Ryan and I just like reread everything Robert's written. His books, he used to have a blog where he was a little more active, so like we read some of that stuff, and I listened to like every podcast he'd been on, every interview he'd given, and we're just trying to compile like all the best stuff from Robert. So it was a similar process of like that JFK document I showed you, where it's like there's way more material then ultimately gets put into the book. So initially it's just like, let's go out and put everything together. So like we're rereading 48 Laws of Power and we're pulling out like the best stories or lessons from that book. And then over time, it was like the themes of the book became more apparent. So, okay, now we have to fill in 30 days for this chapter on the apprenticeship phase. So it slowly became like more and more focused, but initially it's just like, let's go out and put everything together and then decide like, what's this book actually going to look like? And then you sort of distill it down from there. But that process was where we sent Robert probably 9 or 10 drafts as we went. And then we would get on the phone with Robert and like he would give us notes on what he liked, what he didn't like, what he wanted to change, what he didn't think fit. And it was just like an iterative process of us putting a draft together, Robert giving us notes, us going back, addressing those notes, and then slowly like the book came together.
Nice. Do you do any of the editing? Like, do you review brand stuff sometimes?
Yep, I do some of that. And then he has a business partner that's got Nils Parker, who is like Ryan's like go-to editor. And then all the books, like we send a manuscript to the publisher, they send back edits. But like Ryan's thing, and he sends it to, I don't know exactly everyone specifically, but when he has a manuscript draft, he sends it to like a small group of people that give an initial read and some feedback. And he's always like, if I had to cut this by 10%, what would you delete? Like, what would you cut out? He wants to know like, what isn't working? What don't you like? Can this paragraph be 2 sentences? Like those sorts of things. So I'm going through and like suggesting what he might cut. I'm not really tweaking the language of a sentence or tweaking the story. Like it's all there, but can it be tighter?
Yeah. As a reader and kind of like a fan of his material, like what resonates, what doesn't as well, right?
Where did you lose interest? Like, where was I like dragging on, and was it getting like your focus or your attention was waning? Like, he wants to know those things.
Got it. So in the process of working with Ryan and Robert, what advice have you gotten from them? One of the reasons you took this position on was kind of, I assume you long-term like want to be a writer yourself, right? And I mean, you actually do write your own stuff right now, right? But I assume you want to write books long-term. And what kind of mentorship do you feel like you've gotten from them?
If you read my stuff, it's very clear that they're both huge influences on me. And it's been less of like what they've said. It's not like they sit me down and say, do this, this, and this. It's like just through osmosis, really, of like being like, I sort of liken it to like, do you know when you listen to a podcast of like, if you go down a rabbit hole and like listen to a bunch of podcasts of the same person, you sort of catch yourself like thinking like them, talking like them. It's like that, but like rather than listening to a podcast for a month, like I've just been in their vicinity for 4 years now. So it's hard to say specifically like how that's rubbed off on me, but like it absolutely has in a lot of ways. Day to day is completely like influenced by how I've observed them go about their work.
Yeah. I always ask the question, but like I'd hear the similar answer from every guest, and it comes back to like the cliche quote of like, you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with, right? And it is why I'm so passionate about the behind the scenes careers, where I've like being able to go work with someone who's kind of living your ideal lifestyle, is that without anything else, just being around them, you're gonna pick up some nuggets and just like start incorporating those into your life.
For sure. The other big lesson for me has been like the process in which a book comes together has been demystified, because I used to just look at books as like these mysterious objects on a shelf that like just have always existed. And now getting to see how a book comes together, it's just like they're far more laborious than I thought, but that makes it like more feasible to me. Like it's not magical, or it's not like you just get visited by the muse or whatever. It's just like you just sit down for a couple hours every day and go to work on it, and then you do that consistently over a long enough period of time, and like the book is inevitable. If I had gotten to see like the way Robert and Ryan work, I don't even know how I would go about writing a book, but now I know very concretely like how I would do it.
Yeah, you have the system, and probably like Ryan probably borrowed that system from Robert, right?
Yep.
And it's just like you can borrow it from Ryan and Robert now. I can very much say the same thing about YouTube, right? Where it's like you see like these like Mr. Beast YouTube videos, right? It's like, dude, like that's crazy. Like, but then like when you're behind the scenes and you see like just like what goes into like putting a video like that, you're like, okay, like it's complicated, but there's a system and like a rationale behind it, right? So at this point, you've worked on like 4 different books with Ryan. I don't know if that's correct. I know, like, I saw when you started August 2018, I saw that Ryan put out 4 books since then. I don't know if you worked on all of them, but you've kind of seen him go through that process a couple times. And so it's like, oh, okay, I think I get this, right? I could probably do this for myself, like when ready.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things people ask about a lot is like how he's so prolific and how he produces as much as he does. And one of the answers to that is like his note card system is compounding on itself. So he's been making note cards for 15 years. In the discipline book, for instance, he's using an anecdote he wrote on a note card 10 years ago, you know? So it's like, he didn't know at the time that he was going to use that story, where he was going to use it. And for me, like, I've adopted a version of the note cards. So I'm like constantly gathering material myself that I don't know like why I like it or where I might use it. But from like seeing him do it, I just know that like collect the material you find interesting. And at some point in the future, you'll probably use it. So I'm like, who knows? The stuff I'm like gathering currently might show up down the line in a book. I have no idea what that is or what it would be, but like it's just part of the process of a book coming together.
Nice. Yeah, it's cool. I've aspired to do that myself. So. Yeah. There's now a lot of authors that have put together a business and a real brand around the books they've written, right? I think he's done a really good job about it. And I want to ask you what his team looks like and what the business of the author looks like.
Yeah, so it's somewhat of a small team. It's grown in the last year and a half or so. We brought on a bunch of people, but I think there's like 10-ish people full time.
Okay. But you say it's like still somewhat of a small team, but if you look at other authors, right. I don't know that there's a lot that have a team like that, yeah. Right?
3 of those full-time people are like just at the bookstore. That's part of the business. It's sort of one branch of it. And then we've got a full-time video audio producer, a full-time social media manager. I was talking about how I used to do the content calendar for Daily Stoic, and we've since hired someone like 3 months ago, who has taken that over. And we have 2 full-time product managers, and then again,
so that's for Daily Stoic, like merch, like the coins and stuff, or is that separate? And then
the books themselves, and they help with the courses. So anything like that we're selling, they're sort of spearheading how that actually comes into existence.
Nice. And then you have Brass Check, right? Is that still a thing, like that book consultancy that Brian?
Yeah.
Because that's another thing, a smart thing that he did is like, as an author, like you're relying on revenue from your books, which probably at the beginning is like not like super significant, right? But he had this consultancy where he's like helping other people like create best-selling books, which is like a very lucrative, I'd imagine, service. Yeah. So what does the team there look like
right
now?
Brass Check is technically my employer. Everything's under the Brass Check umbrella. We do less of the ghostwriting, book consultancy stuff these days, just with like the success of Ryan stuff and Daily Stoic, and there's just less time to devote to that. We will do it occasionally, like if there's a project or someone comes to Ryan and it's an idea or a book that he wants to be a part of, like we'll take it on. But it's become less and less of what Brass Check does.
Got it. Okay, so now I want to talk about book marketing. I remember reading Perennial Seller. Like you said, I think it was the first book you read. Yeah. I think it was one of the first books I read from Ryan, and I remember like being mind blown by just like, because I'm a marketer at heart, and so like the strategy behind marketing like a best-selling book. Can you break down what the marketing for Ryan's latest book looked like, if anything has changed from like the map he laid out in Perennial Seller?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things he says in Perennial Seller is like to build a list. You know, he's like, if you're a creator and you want to at some point sell whatever it is, in this case a book, start building that audience now, and then when it does come time to sell a book, like you have a direct relationship with that audience who knows your stuff. So that's really like the model for Ryan's stuff, is like to keep the audience engaged and growing. So Daily Stoic is like a huge focus for us on the newsletter side. How do we continue to grow that list and keep putting out like good content? In the event that we do have a book to sell, like we go straight to that list, and if we can convert a percentage of that audience, we're going to sell a lot of copies straight out of the gate. And that's like what gives a book the best chance, you know, is like if you can come out and like hit a New York Times bestseller list right away, then the marketing like kind of starts to happen by itself.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, not only the newsletter, but also social media, right? Where he's built a team to kind of sustainably build that platform and help him in building that platform, right?
The newsletter, the podcast, YouTube, social media. Like when a book comes out, like we've got a lot of people we can go tell about it, rather than like he still does like the podcast tour, you know, he'll still go on podcasts, but like I think without the audience, we would be more reliant on like his podcast appearances converting.
And he'd probably do way more, right? Like right now he probably focuses on the heavy hitters, but like back in the days, he probably did like 10x more podcasts,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like he's...
And like reaching out to bloggers and all the micro stuff,
Yeah. He's, you know, he gets invited all the time to do these podcasts, but like in the last year, I think the only one he like did was Rogan. And then he does...
Can't say no to Rogan.
He's got like his friends who have showed like Tim Ferriss and Tom. He's been on Tom's a bunch. People that like he's gotten to know over the years. Like he'll do their show when he has a book come out, but he's not like swarming all the podcasts the way that he might otherwise do if he didn't have his audience as big as it is.
And so the list, if I thought I read somewhere there's like 550,000 subscribers. Is that accurate? And open rate is like 40% or something like that?
Yeah, it's like 46%.
Wow, that's crazy. Do you send an email every day?
Yeah. So
Jesus Christ.
Monday through Friday, and then we've got our sort of membership group, Daily Stoic Life. They also receive emails Saturday and Sunday.
That's incredible.
And we also send out a Saturday review email.
So that means that like every day at least like 250,000 people like read the Daily Stoic.
Yeah, it's wild.
That's wild. That's an incredible amount of trust. Can you talk about the kind of logistic that go behind the newsletter? You mentioned like a backlog, and you and Ryan like have built like a huge backlog, and then what I'm curious to hear as well is like how have you guys thought of growing in the past? How are you guys growing it now?
Like logistically, the way that the content works is we've got a Google document where we just call it the unsent doc, just constantly adding to that buffer. I think currently it's like 120 pages long or something. But again, like as we're reading stuff, or Ryan will frequently just like text or email me a picture from like a book he's reading, and it'll just be like brackets around a paragraph or something, and it'll just be like, I think this could be a Daily Stoic email.
So you add that to the buffer, you add that to that document, and then he later on is going to expand upon it when he has time.
Or kind of how it works? Or I would draft an email, add it to the doc, tag him, and then he reworks it or polishes it. And now like I've been doing it long enough where like as I'm reading stuff, I know like, oh yeah, this would be a good Daily Stoic email. He like batch writes them, but like he might sit down and just knock out like 6. And then you do that every week, and then over time the buffer just gets bigger and bigger. So but the source comes from like what he's consuming on a daily basis. He'll like pull inspiration from that and be like, this might be a good one, and then he'll come back with your help and expand upon that in an email. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Or if he like listens to a podcast and hears something good, same thing. And then it goes into that document, and then 2 people do an edit on each email, and then they get moved to another like record document, because like I said, all of the emails also get recorded by Ryan and get posted on the podcast. He like blocks out some time each week to just record a bunch of them, and then they go into a Notion board. I don't even know if Ryan knows this exists, but it's just for us to like organize what we've got for the calendar. Once Ryan records them, that means they've been edited and they're ready to get scheduled. So we move them there, and then we just have like different themes and categories for like making sure we're not being repetitive. Like we don't want to send out 3 straight Amor Fati emails or whatever the topic is. So we're organizing them there, and then like in Notion, we have a calendar where we're just plugging things in, and we try to stay like a month out on stuff. And I think you said when you started, the mailing list was like 50,000, right? Yep. So it's like 10x over the last 4 years since you joined. I'm guessing you've been kind of involved with like trying to grow that as well. So like what have been the strategies to grow it, and anything that's changed around that? I mean, we were doing a lot of SEO style content, and those articles still are like do really well. Like a lot of people are still coming in through like the What is Stoicism article, or like Who is Marcus Aurelius, like things like that still do really well. The way that it's changed is like the podcast, YouTube channel, social media, all of that stuff is really just to like ultimately try to get people to the newsletter. So it's like within a video, Ryan's gonna call out the email and like, if you like this, like you'll like our daily email. And it's still like pretty surprising how like we'll post a page from the Daily Stoic book on Facebook and people will comment like, what book is this from? You know? And it's like, it's from the book of this account, you know, it's the same, but there's still like some disconnect between like a lot of people follow the Instagram account and don't know the newsletter exists. So we're trying to like get more people over from the various channels. Yeah, it's all sort of like content marketing, trying to funnel it to the email, but now we're just like on the various platforms. And the other thing I'll say is like the YouTube channel, like the videos, the social media content, like Twitter threads and Instagram carousels, the TikTok videos, like it's all downstream from the written content. It's all first starting as an article or an email or a chapter in a book. And then Ryan is just like, okay, so I told this story and people seem to be resonating with it. How can we make it work on TikTok or an Instagram reel? All the ideas start in the written form. So that's been like how it's evolved. We're now on like all these other platforms, but it's still just like the core ideas from what Ryan's writing about.
Yeah, that's cool. It's like kind of like a double-sided diagram where it's like the social media content comes from the written content, right? It's like repurposed.
Yeah.
And then that social media content, because it has like bigger reach and like reaches more people that aren't like maybe aren't following Ryan or maybe aren't like following the newsletter, then that trickles back into the newsletter, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Nice, man. The last thing I want to end on is you've been over the last couple of months, I think it hasn't like barely been a year, right? You've kind of been focusing more on your own content.
Yep.
You have like your own newsletter, 6 at 6, right?
Yep.
Which anyone can go and subscribe to at billyoppenheimer.com. But you've been more active on Twitter recently, right? So I wanted to ask you what that experience has been like for you, because like your content has somewhat picked up, especially on Twitter, right? And I think you just hit 3,000 subscribers on your own personal mailing list. So it's like if there's anyone that's listening that's kind of like on the edge and like thinking of creating content, I wanted for you to share like what that's been like for you, any tips you have, and would you recommend it for other people?
Yeah.
Also, what opportunities have like come up, right?
Yeah, sure. When I started working for Ryan, I told you I had that blog initially before I started working for him. I sort of like put that on hold just because I wanted to focus on the work and like doing a good job. And it was actually like he began to encourage that I start putting my own stuff out there. And again, like from reading Perennial Seller, I was like, the first thing I'm going to do is start an email list. And just the experience of working with Ryan and the Daily Stoic and seeing like we've been talking about, like you want to have that audience when it does come time to maybe promote a book or whatever it happens to be. So I knew I wanted to do a newsletter of some kind. The way I was thinking about it, I was like, what are things I'm currently doing in my day-to-day that would like easily make a newsletter possible? So initially my first idea was to scan note cards that I make throughout the week and just send like, here's 6 note cards I made this week. And I scanned like a bunch of note cards. I don't know, it just didn't feel right. It didn't like look cool. Didn't look right. So I was like, well, I could just like transcribe these and just have it be like kind of like a 5-bullet Friday, but rather than just like a bunch of links, like each one is like its own idea. So like you can go read where I got it from, but like I want it to be valuable in itself, like so you don't have to go off and read the whole book or the whole article. Like you get like one of the core ideas from that thing. So then that's what I started to do. And like the 6 was just I played lacrosse in college and I wore number 6, so I was like, all right, let's go with 6. And then 6 at 6 just like had a ring to it. That's how the idea like came together. And even that has evolved over time, where initially I was just each week I would go through my box of note cards and just pull out 6 random things, and they were all like unrelated to each other. And then over time I gravitated towards like a more thematic style. Like I pick a theme for the week. So like last week I did it on doing less better. So like prioritizing and picking like a couple things and doing those really well. So each of the 6 things like were stories or anecdotes around people that have like done that and why that works. And the newsletter then led me to like, how can I get the word out more about this? So that's why I started doing some more stuff on Twitter. And like on that theme of doing less, I knew I wanted to just pick like one platform initially. Like I don't want to immediately go do Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. I don't want to be on all these different platforms, because I was just like, just the thought of it overwhelmed me. And just Twitter seemed like, as a writer, like that's the platform where I was consuming the most content, or like where I like to pop on it and read stuff from time to time. So that's why I chose that. But it's been cool. And I guess what I would say, your initial question was like, for people that are thinking about it or like on the verge of maybe creating content. One of the things that Ryan told me when I was like kicking around the idea for starting the newsletter and my own site and stuff was like, I told him I started a document where I was like writing a bunch of articles and I was trying to find like a theme or like a niche that I could write about. And he was like, dude, you're overthinking it. Like, just start. You're trying to map out you're trying to map out the whole game. Just like map out the first couple plays and like start playing, you know? And I thought that was really good advice. And it'd probably be what I would pass along to other people. Cause I get the sense from emails I've since received is like, there is a lot of that trying to like perfect it on the front end versus like just start. And then over time, like you find your groove with it. So like the newsletter, it looks completely different today than it did at the start, but like I couldn't have gotten to where it is now without like the iterations of actually doing it.
That's such great advice. Yeah. It's like put out the first one and then iterate as you go. Right.
And the other thing I'll say is like, and I did a thread on what I've learned from when Daily Stoic hit 500,000 email subscribers. I had something in there about like lengthening your timeline of like, it was an inevitability that Daily Stoic was going to hit 500,000 subscribers because Ryan has no plans to stop doing it. Like, I feel like people are in more of a rush to like grow a huge audience, but like what happens when you do hit that number? You're just going to stop? Like, you'll probably just keep making the content. So like the way I try to think about it is like, I'm not really concerned with what the list is at right now because I have no plans to stop doing it. And I'm just confident, like, if I just keep showing up for a long enough period, the list will get big enough for beyond what I can like set a goal for. So I would just say like, if you want to start it, like probably it's because you just like doing the thing. So I would sort of detach from like the numbers, especially early on, because like for the first 6 months of that newsletter, sending it out to like 40 people, you know, it takes time.
That's awesome. Since then though, it does seem like you've connected with like some pretty cool people. Like through Twitter, through the newsletter. Like right now, it seems like you're even connecting with like some cool authors, right? That other people that you look up to. So
yeah, it has been cool. And that was initially what I was thinking about with the newsletter. It's just like, I just want to connect with people. If someone finds the stuff I'm writing about interesting, it's like we have similar interests. I just want to connect with those people. It's like how we've gotten to know each other. Like it wouldn't have happened without me putting stuff out in the world. And yeah, it's been cool to people I've got to meet through it and I've reached out and that read the newsletter or have read a Twitter thread and like liked it. And it's definitely been like one of the great benefits of putting stuff out there.
Nice, man. I think it's a great place to wrap. So follow Billy on Twitter at Billy Oppenheimer and the newsletter at billyoppenheimer.com.
Yes.
Check it out. 6 at 6.
6 at 6.
It's now 6 p.m. No longer 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Which probably a good call.
A slight shift to a p.m. But yeah, it goes out every Sunday.
But yeah, that's a wrap. Thanks for coming on, and hopefully this helps a lot of people who are up and coming writers and want to do something like follow a similar path than you did.
Yeah, I hope so. And if anyone listens to this and wants to reach out, as Ryan did, I'm very responsive on email. I love hearing from people. So
what's your email? It's just billy@billyoppenheimer.com.
Yep. And it's on my site. If you go to like the newsletter tab, I've got a link there. Just feel free.
Sweet. That's it.